Hello, everyone, and welcome to Penning the Past. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation. I'm Dean Glass, and I'm delighted to host this lecture series presented by Save Our Heritage organization, where we explore the rich history and heritage of our region. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank our members and supporters. Your continued involvement makes events like this possible, helping us fulfill our mission and preserve and celebrate San Diego's unique cultural legacy. If you're not yet a member of SOHO, I encourage you to consider joining. Membership grants you free access to all Penning the Past lectures, along with other exclusive benefits, including complimentary museum admission, discounts at our museum shops, and invitations to special events. It's also a wonderful way to support historic preservation in San Diego County. Today, we are pleased to have with us Kristi Hawthorne, Oceanside's preeminent historian. Kristi has been a resident of Oceanside since 1983 and has served as president of the Oceanside Historical Society since 2002. Her dedication to preserving and sharing Oceanside's fascinating past is unparalleled, whether through her writing, downtown history walks, or her regular presentations at the Oceanside Public Library. Her presentation today will guide us through Oceanside's rich and varied history, exploring the stories behind its iconic landmarks, historic buildings, and the communities that have shaped our city's character over the years. We're in for an enlightening hour. Please help me in welcoming Kristi Hawthorne.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be part of your series, and there's nothing more that I'd love to talk about is Oceanside history. And as Dean was saying, I've been a resident of Oceanside since '83. I joined the Oceanside Historical Society in 1987 when I was just 25 years old. I guess as a child, I've always had an interest in history. I just never knew at that age really what my passion was going to be. But I think the combination of loving my city and having an interest in history and research just came, in culmination. So I'm going to talk about the history of Oceanside. We have one of the largest photo collections in San Diego County with 60,000 images and more. So some of these are my favorite. Some of these are sometimes the only one of a particular event or building or even person. But let me go ahead and start the slideshow. Can you guys all see that? Let me know. Are you guys able to see?
We're not seeing the slideshow yet.
Okay, let me go back. See, when Dean and I tried this, it worked just well. Hold on one second. I'm going to share. No. Dean, maybe I have to have the share. Let me go back. The share the screen. Let's do this, right?
Yeah, it's coming up now.
Okay. Sorry about that. This is one of my biggest fears is technology, not history. So anyway, thank you for your patience. Of course, I can't begin the history of Oceanside without, speaking about the Mission San Luis Rey, which is really outside of, obviously, the city limits or the downtown area. But the San Luis Rey Mission was founded in 1798. This is a beautiful historic view of the valley and the mission. It's during restoration, but many of the white settlers coming from all over the country settled in the San Luis Rey Valley and settled particularly near the ruins of the Mission San Luis Rey and used actually the Mission San Luis Rey, the materials to build their own homes and ranches, and took the roofing tiles off to put the roofing tiles on some of their early homes. And many of the San Luis Rey residents later moved their businesses and sometimes even their buildings to Oceanside when it was established many years later. The founder of Oceanside is Andrew Jackson Myers. He was living in the San Luis Rey Valley when he saw that the railroad was nearly complete, bringing trains and passengers from the Riverside, Colton, Temecula Valley down into San Diego. He went up to Los Angeles and applied for a land grant, and he received 160 acres in 1883 in what is now downtown Oceanside. This is one of the earliest views of Oceanside. There's not much to see. We're looking west towards the ocean. Before we had a train depot, we just had a very simple loading dock and platform to bring in the mail, to bring in train passengers, and that was it. And you can see just even the natural landscape of what Oceanside would have looked like, even before it was established. This is one, again, a lot of early pictures, but this is probably what you would have seen once you entered the town of Oceanside. This is on the North Cleveland Street, and I just love the fact, I love the horse, number one, and he's draped in some sort of rope, but this is one of the first buildings you would have seen. We've got a pool hall. The next door was a saloon, which was unnamed, and then we've got a real estate office. And so that's what passengers are greeted with, come and buy land, have a beer, and maybe stay and play a game of pool. And you can see some of the townsmen there who look rather intimidating, but hopefully maybe inviting. And Oceanside was inviting because, people did come from the inland areas, and they were starting to purchase and invest in Oceanside. In fact, Theodore Bunker came from Los Angeles with his family, and he built what would be a boarding house / commercial building. His home, you can see on the left-hand side, that's where the Bunker family lived. And then he had this boarding house and commercial store downstairs. This building, I'm happy to say, is still standing. It's at 322 North Cleveland Street. It's one of the earliest buildings built in Oceanside that is still standing, if not the earliest. This building has been repurposed and is now a coffee shop, but it has seen many uses, but it looks very, very similar with very minimal changes from the early day when it was built. We had this beautiful, beautiful bank building downtown Oceanside, which is on the corner of what we would have called Hill and Second, which is now Mission and North Coast Highway. This Victorian bank building was quite impressive. It not only housed the bank, it housed different, storefronts, a drugstore. Early on, it was where the city hall met. And to the right, you could see an earlier building too, the what I call the Schuler building. But this was pretty magnificent for a little town of Oceanside that had only been in existence for 4 years. So we were established in 1883. In 4 years, we have this magnificent building. And the other thing that we had going for us to bring in those visitors and maybe long-term investors who were going to come in was the beautiful South Pacific Hotel. For those of you who may be familiar with downtown Oceanside, this is just north of the resorts that we have now. It's north of the Mission Pacific Resort. The interesting thing about the South Pacific Hotel that it faced the railroad tracks. So as you're looking at this building, the ocean would be, we're looking, west towards the ocean. And the reason why they built the South Pacific Hotel looking at the railroad tracks is because Andrew Jackson Myers would have excursion trains coming from the inland valleys. And people would pay a small fee to come on these excursion trains. You were fed lunch, and you perhaps stayed for the whole day. You probably had lunch at the South Pacific Hotel. And it was very enticing with the beautiful grounds. I've got another photo. You can see just how grand this beautiful hotel was. And it was quite substantial for a little town of Oceanside that maybe had just a couple of hundred people when it was first built, but it was on ocean front, and it really was a very beautiful little town, even back in its very modest beginnings. Here's a view of Oceanside about 1888. You can see that how ginormous that hotel was in comparison with the little town. And it kind of makes me think about how some people have issue with the new resorts that we have downtown, and how um, um, obtrusive they are. But we can see how even this hotel was very obtrusive to a little town that was probably only, was developed maybe in a 3 to 4 block radius. You see the view of the bank building at the very center of the photo. And this is Mission, what we call now Mission Avenue, the dirt path there. This is Mission Avenue taking you down into the town of Oceanside. This is Oceanside's earliest church building. I always like to point this out. It's still standing. We have a lot of original buildings. And again, as a historian, you want to keep these historic buildings and homes, and you want to document them and save all that history and be able to share that. And although Oceanside has seen tremendous change over even recent history, but even decades ago, this is Oceanside's oldest church building, still standing. It's currently on the corner, because our street names have changed quite frequently, but it's on the corner of Seagaze and Ditmar Street. Then our train depot, we actually got an actual train depot from the Santa Fe Railway Company in 1888. Now, this is similar to all the other little train depots that, like Carlsbad and Solana Beach, I think, and Vista, all these quaint little towns got these adorable little depots, and Oceanside was no exception. And this is Oceanside's train depot. And the railway company saw that we warranted this depot instead of just a loading dock, because our population was growing. 1888 was a really busy year. It's the year we incorporated. Oceanside incorporated in 1888. We were just the third city in our town in San Diego County to do so. Shortly after we incorporated, then Escondido. And of course, you probably are very aware of the Graves House on North Pacific Street. While earlier research would say that the Graves House was built in 1887. We now know that it was actually built in 1888 due to a newspaper article we were able to find that talks about the house was under construction, I believe, in May of 1888. But this beautiful Victorian house would have been a summer or vacation home for Dr. Graves and his wife. They didn't come live here. They came and summered here. And it was one of many, vacation homes. And Oceanside homes were built small. We didn't have big palatial residents, or if we did, there were very few, because I think a lot of people, again, they were coming from the Inland Valley. They were buying property. They were building these little cottages, and they were coming to spend the summers. In contrast, however, this is the very unique and interesting home of Colonel Daniel Horn. This was built up on Mission Avenue near Horn Street. We have a street called Horn Street named after him. Colonel Horn came from Kansas, and he built this home. Unfortunately for us, it's no longer standing. They dismantled this in the late 1950s and moved a portion of it into another neighborhood, but it's unrecognizable. Colonel Horn would later become Oceanside's first mayor. He was actually the president of the Board of Trustees before we actually called that position mayor. This is another of, if you look to the right, it is the Schuler building built in 1888. So we have 3 brick buildings still left from the 1880s in our downtown. That would be the church building that I showed you earlier, the bunker building, and then this this Schuler buildings here to the right. Interestingly, thing about this building was it's a 2-story building in this photo. About 20, 30 years later, they lowered the very, very high ceiling, and they created another floor. So then it became a 3-story building. They didn't build it up. They didn't raise the building. They just lowered the ceiling. And then later it was used as a hotel. This building has been renovated and looks dramatically and drastically different, but it is still standing, and today it's known as the Brick Hotel. This is the only known image of Oceanside's pier. Oceanside, we're known for our piers. We have a love affair with a pier. And if you can see, if you're able to see this photo, if you're on a desktop, and I hope that you are, you can very, very faintly see a pier. So up onto the left, we've got the back of the South Pacific Hotel on the bluff. We've got a little beach shelter, if you will, that people are getting some shade. But if you look directly, we're looking south in this photo. You see a horse and a foal there. But then you see what looks to be, the Oceanside Pier. Now, Oceanside's first pier was built in 1888, the same year that we incorporated. And it was at the end of what we now call Wisconsin Street. And unfortunately for Oceanside, this pier only managed to survive, if you will, about 2 years until it was wiped entirely away from winter storms. But that wasn't going to be the last of Oceanside's pier. In 1894, we built our second pier. Some of the decking and even some of the pilings was recycled from that first pier, and that lumber was stored behind the South Pacific Hotel until they could raise funds to build a second pier. This pier, as you see, is the second pier. It's quite short. It was braced with iron pilings, iron on the pilings, and it was called the Little Iron Wharf because of that. And this is under construction. They haven't even put up the railing. The railing was added later. In fact, there's a notation in the newspaper about how they needed to put up railing on the pier. You would think that was a no-brainer, but someone actually fell off the pier, and that warranted the necessity for railing. Unfortunately for Oceanside, our beautiful hotel, the South Pacific, burned down in 1896. There's a couple of legends associated with this fire. No one was hurt. If you're able to see, you can see some furniture piled up. The fire started on the third floor, and the firemen did not have the proper equipment, ladders, or even hoses that could reach the origin of the fire, and they simply had to watch the hotel burn down. Now, there was two other hotel fires in San Diego County. Off the top of my head, the one was in Carlsbad, and I think the other one was in La Jolla, if I'm not mistaken. And so there has been rumors that maybe there was an arsonist. Was there someone who just wanted to wreak havoc in these towns and burn down hotels? Or was it because the real estate boom of the 1880s and early 1890 was really gone? And, these hotels would have cost a lot of money in tax dollars and staff, and maybe they weren't being utilized, and perhaps maybe it was a planned arson, but no one knows for sure. But we can only guess. Oceanside's third pier was built in 1903. Storm damage was always seemed to be the cause and the necessity of having to build pier after pier. But Oceanside was undaunted. If that little iron wharf that was built in 1894 was not going to be either long enough or strong enough, Oceanside would build again. This is a view of South Pacific Street. We're looking north, and you can see, again, how natural, if you will, the beach actually does with dunes and other, what am I trying to say? Landscape, if you will, natural landscape. So Oceanside's pier actually looks a little lonely, but Oceanside would have been a very small town at that time. We did not replace the South Pacific Hotel until 1904 with this building that was a 3-story building. A lady by the name of Gertrude Bowers, who came from Redlands, she is the one who invested in this hotel and had it built. She owned a lot of property in Oceanside, and this hotel actually stood until 1966. It was eventually painted white and called the Colonial Inn when it was last probably known by old timers or longtime residents in Oceanside. You'll see that El San Luis Rey Hotel on the bluff there above Pacific Street or on Pacific Street. And then Oceanside, that same year, we built what was an electric plant behind this bathhouse, which was really housed a plunge. And so there was heated salt water that the folks could go in there and go swimming, or there was changing rooms and things like that to go to the beach. You'll see even a hint of a boardwalk, a wooden boardwalk that took you from the pier, which is to the right of this photo, and took you down to the boardwalk, and actually, traveled basically about where our strand is right now. If you've been to Oceanside, you might have viewed our beautiful, what we call our Rorick homes. They've been in the Rorick family for over 110 years or more. The Rorick family came from Kansas. They built two homes, one on, I think it's, oh gosh, I don't even want to guess the address, but I think it's 202 and 204, if I remember correctly. But you'll see this house, this is 108, so I'm sorry. But the Rorick homes, quite beautiful. They're large. One was owned and lived in by Dave Rorick, who was the city attorney of the city of Oceanside, and then he built this house next door for his father to live in. So I'm happy to say that these beautiful homes are still on Pacific Street. Lots of people ask about them. They have a continuous garden in the back. These occupy two large lots, or maybe even four. And David Rorick Jr., before his death, said that he believed that his father had commissioned Kate Sessions to landscape and design the garden of the Rorick homes. But he wasn't sure, and I haven't been able to find anything to confirm that, but that would be very interesting. In 1911, the Rosicrucian Fellowship founded their headquarters in Oceanside, very unique buildings there. The fellowship itself in Oceanside is dwindling, but this beautiful, beautiful domed building is still standing, along with many other buildings. But it's worth a visit if you're ever up here in Oceanside. In 1919, of course, Oceanside, you hear we're bustling here. We're just at the brink of the 1920s, which is going to be really a decade of great prosperity and growth for many cities until the Depression hits. But what we see here is the Oceanside Pier. Folks are at some sort of event, and Oceanside has its first band shell, which was built in 1919. It's in about the same location that our present band shell is now. You can see the plunge on the other side. And of course, this is probably, bringing people from all over North San Diego County, because Oceanside really was, the place to visit for the fireworks, for the parades, for the events, because we had this pier, which was so inviting and so fun. And of course, now we're able to do concerts and events at our band shell. This is a rare aerial photo, about 1923, of downtown Oceanside. You see the bank building right before, it's about a year before it's going to get torn down. What we're looking at with all the cars is Hill Street, or now what we call Coast Highway, and the intersection of Mission Avenue. So it just looks like a little quaint little town, and it was. It still was, in its really growth spurt, and I'll talk about that. Here's a great view. This again is what we currently are Coast Highway, which later became part of what by this time it became part of the Highway 101 system. And you can see a great view of that bank building. But to the right, if you'll notice, there was a unique structure. It was a garage or service station built to resemble the Mission San Luis Rey Tower, and it was called the Mission Garage. So unfortunately, that building still exists, but unfortunately, the tower was taken away, oh my gosh, probably 80 years or more ago. The building to your left, on the left-hand side of the photo, is still standing. It was built in 1911 as the J.E. Jones hardware store, and it's now currently a CVS pharmacy. One thing that came to Oceanside was a new subdivision called Plumosa Heights. Of course, we had lots of subdivisions, but Plumosa Heights was probably, to my knowledge, the first restricted subdivision. Banning anyone probably that were not, white. I think that in particular, I think in the CC&Rs or whatever it was called, the restrictions were spelled out, and then there was other restrictions about the home placement. The cost of your house had to be a certain amount. And now these weren't spectacular homes, but the interesting thing about Plumosa Heights, the streets were lined with a type of palm tree that was like Plumosa cocos or something like that. The streets in Plumosa Heights were all cement instead of asphalt, which is still true today. They have their own unique street lights that have survived all of these years. And the homes were largely built, in a Spanish, mission eclectic style. And Plumosa Heights is just, 3 blocks, and but it's really still quite charming. This is one of the homes on Leonard Street that is still standing, and there's quite a number of these types of homes. They're not very large, but they're very charming and very cute. And some of the homes have been McMansionized, I will say, and added second stories, but there's still a lot of these charming little bungalows. Now, I keep talking about our bank building. It was torn down because the bank directors at the time thought it was too old-fashioned, and so they replaced it with this more modern building. This building is on the northwest corner of current today Coast Highway and Mission. It's still standing, but largely its facade has been entirely covered up except for the very top. It's been stuccoed, and the windows have been, have some sort of, facade on it, which I'm hoping that one day that perhaps they would consider restoring. Directly across the street in 1928 was Oceanside's Bank of Italy, which later became Bank of America. You can see how beautiful this building was, and it is still standing, but it's been stripped of all of this beautiful architecture detailing. The clay roof and the window frames and the little the work that's the concrete work or whatever it was that's done around the edging. It's been completely gone. It's now houses our swamis. It looks like a very 1950s building because they renovated it and modernized it in 1950. The building to the left was built in 1928. It's still standing. Again, it has a facade. So a lot of our old buildings are still there. They've just undergone significant changes. Oceanside welcomed its 4th pier in 1927. We celebrated over the 4th of July weekend, and it brought like 5,000 people. Oceanside probably only had a population of maybe 1,500 people at the time. So most of the people that came from all over just to celebrate the 4th of July with us. There's a ship out there. It's the USS Percival. Came up from San Diego, and people were able to take tours off of the Oceanside Pier to the Percival. This building was built in 1924, but J.C. Penney's comes to town and leases this building for almost 40 years. And it was a really big deal for a little town of Oceanside sign to have a national department store, and it was just part of our growth. You see this building is later than that time, but I was able to get this and obtain this from the J.C. Penney's archives. And who knew that J.C. Penney had their own archives, but they do. I always try to think outside of the box and think, if I can't find a photo, is there somebody that does? The Hotel DeWitt was actually built in 1927 as the Hotel Keisker, which is an interesting name. It was the first hotel built for the traveling public in Oceanside. So we had hotels and smaller little places to stay, but those were meant for people who were going to maybe stay at the beach and stay and vacation, whether it was for a weekend or a week or two or a summer. But this was built right on Coast Highway, or what we called Hill Street. And this building is still standing. It's now currently, it's a boutique hotel, but it's the smallest, and I'm probably going to get this wrong. I want to say it's the smallest, it's not a Marriott. I think it's the smallest Hyatt. And it's really, really charming. And I'm glad that it's still in use. It fell out of favor with the traveling public, probably by the 1940s and 50s, because it only had one or two rooms that had ensuite. So it had a sink if you wanted to shave and brush your teeth and wash your hands, but if you wanted to take a bath, you had to go down the hall. Of course, if you've been to Oceanside and you've been on our strand, Robert's Cottages, they're now painted a pink or salmon color. These were built in 1928 by A.J. Clark, and they were called Clark's Deluxe Cottages. By the 1940s, a husband and wife by the last name of Roberts purchased them, and I'm really glad to say that these are all intact. They used to have a longer garage that ran alongside so that they could accommodate parking. But these are still very, very charming. This is on the 700 block of North Strand, north of Oceanside's Pier. This really cool building is as you can see, the Ed Woolmer Music House is built in 1931, and you see the Art Deco style. But today it's been covered up, and I am hoping against hope that there's a big metal awning and then there's this other linear metal awning that's on the second story of it, and it covers everything up. And right now the building is boarded up, but something's happening with it. And I'm hoping and praying that whoever owns this building now will uncover the original facade. And it's just one of those gems. And right now it's really an eyesore. This is right downtown Oceanside on the corner of Pierview Way and Coast Highway. And it really does not look very nice, but hopefully something's going to happen, and we're going to have another hidden gem exposed. Of course, Irving Gill designed several buildings in Oceanside for the city of Oceanside. This is the police and fire station in 1929. The fire station, the fire department just vacated this building in August of 2024. And currently the Oceanside Historical Society is in what used to be the police station. So to the second arch to your right is where our door would be, and that's where we're located. And we've been in this location thanks to the city of Oceanside since 1996. There's a close-up of the police department, and the city court was next door. And that was an addition to the right that was added later. Gill also designed the Americanization School in 1931. It has gone over a restoration in 1991, and it's going under another renovation to make it ADA compliant. It's now currently a neighborhood center. It's the Crown Heights Neighborhood Center. And but this is a really unique building. I love it that even though these children were segregated unfairly, because it was mostly Mexican students only. Didn't matter if you were Japanese. The Japanese students and other non-English speaking students didn't get segregated. But I love the fact that Gill designed such a beautiful building, and at the time it was very innovative because he was using light and different colors, not only on the outside but the inside. And this Gill building is quite remarkable, again, with its dome. And it's a neighborhood resource center, which is wonderful use of the building now. Of course, our city hall was also built by Gill. Gill also built another school we called it the Nevada Street School. That school was torn down in the 1950s. This is the another Gill building. Built in 1936. It was the Oceanside Blade Tribune building, and it was. This is another view of it when it was completed. Now, this building, for years, for decades, was covered in a heavy stucco, which was really splotchy. It had swirl. It was the ugliest thing. And when we did our downtown history walks, I was always made apologies for this building because it was a guild building and it was like one of the most hideous things I could ever see. Well, someone purchased the building and started a restoration and started removing all of that stucco. And amazingly, they were able to do it in such a way, even though the original facade is marred, it wasn't terribly marred. And I remember taking a walk and for the first time and seeing that the original sign had been exposed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this happening. So good things do happen with old buildings. They don't all get torn down. Sometimes they do get restored. This now houses a restaurant, an Italian restaurant called the Blade 1936, but believed to be Irving Gill's one of his last designs. I don't know if you guys know about St. Malo, but this for years was Oceanside's little hidden exclusive neighborhood at the end of Pacific Street. So if you drive all the way on South Pacific Street to the south, you'll come to this beautiful archway. This is the original archway. It looks quite different now, but Kenyon Keith came from Pasadena. He bought 28 acres south at the city limit, which then later became the city limit, but then to the Buena Vista Lagoon. And he started handpicking friends and family who he allowed to buy lots. And then he had a very specific home design. And even today, if a house is built there, it has to adhere to the architectural design and look, which was what he thought was, it's called St. Malo, which he thought was like a French, fishing village. And this became, again, these weren't homes where people lived. They summered here. And a lot of times these people were so wealthy that this would be their second or third summer home sometimes. The heiress to the Maytag fortune had a summer home here. Ben Hecht, who wrote, the original Scarface, and Frank Butler and Jason Joy, who were playwrights, they had homes here. When in 1984, during the Los Angeles Olympics, Prince Philip came in from Los Angeles and with a motorcade brought him to stay in St. Malo. So people had connections. This is the home of Jason Joy. Just to give you an example, many of these homes, even though they weren't quite large, but this one is, they were also built with servants' quarters. And these they called it the Pasadena on the Rocks because so many of these people came and lived in Pasadena. Oceanside's first post office building, we had a post office, but not in its own building. It was usually in a storefront. Was not built until 1936 in the throes of the Depression as a WPA project. This is still a working post office. It was recently renamed in honor of Charles Etta Reese Allen, who was just the third Black woman to live in Oceanside. She was the first Black business owner, had her own restaurant, and she helped to found the NAACP, the Oceanside Girls Club, and a church. And she was really a dynamo and a community leader in all respects. Of course, Camp Pendleton really, really changed Oceanside literally overnight with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The Department of the Navy took over Rancho Santa Margarita. This is one of the earliest, main gate photos, if you will. It's vintage. But Oceanside had a population of maybe 4,200 people in 1940. And within 10 years, our population was tripled. If you can imagine a little sleepy beach town, we were inundated, of course, by people training to go to war. But the infrastructure that had to be built for Camp Pendleton, the roads that had to be built, the electrical, the phone lines, everything, the buildings. So it brought in laborers, construction workers, it brought in engineers, and then their families, and there was nowhere for them to live except for Oceanside. And so we had a huge population, our schools, everything. We were kind of actually in emergency mode. One of the things that had to change almost immediately was the little train depot that was very quaint, had to be expanded. That was actually torn down and not saved. And we built this a large train depot or train station, if you will, to accommodate the growing train traffic. Oceanside's fifth pier was built in 1947. Here's just a really beautiful, this is a postcard color shot. Obviously, you can see just the expansive pier, our paved strand, and it's really a favorite photo, image of mine, as well as people are just captivated by the lifeguard tower and everything. It's really, really vintage Oceanside. Oceanside built our second band shell in 1950. Here we are at the Miss Southern California Beauty Contest in 1955. You can see the crowds that they just jammed in here. Guest judges were John Wayne, Betty Grable, Fred McMurray, Regis Philbin. They came all over, and these contestants would come all over from Southern California to compete. And the draw was that there might be talent scouts in the audience or as judges, and you might make your way into Hollywood. Here's just another aerial view of another one of those to kind of give you that view of Oceanside. You see we've got a miniature golf up on Pacific Street. We've got the band shell with the beauty contest going on. And you can see that the El San Luis Rey, which is now painted white as a Colonial Inn, is still in place. And we've got the strand. So really a really great photo that captures so much of Oceanside. One of the things I want to point out, besides from Gill, we have a home designed by Ed Lemure at 1812 Bailey Drive in our Fire Mountain area. Fire Mountain was considered, it was unincorporated. And shortly after, I think this home was built, this becomes part of Oceanside, but it was part of unincorporated San Diego County. But Ed Lemure, I can't speak a lot about her, off the top of my head as I could probably other folks, but her home on Bailey Street was quite beautiful. It's still intact. It's got just so many original features. The owner, it's only had like maybe two owners, and the kitchen and the interior is almost completely intact. And the house is situated on a hill. You can't even see it from the street, yet it's situated on a hill with panoramic views. It's really quite stunning. Oceanside's harbor was built in 1963. We have the only small craft harbor between Dana Point and San Diego County. And here you see, this is an old postcard image with the boat docks, probably not as numerous as we have now, of course. But this was just another thing, Oceanside. I don't know about you. I see a lot of social media posts. People get irritated here because things are changing very rapidly, and so they say locals only. That's been a bumper sticker probably since the 70s for surfers and whatnot. But Oceanside for decades, if not from its very inception, has really beckoned tourists and visitors, and wanting to offer these amenities, not just for its residents, because I enjoy the harbor, but the harbor really was to be a draw, to bring in more business and more, money and more, more visitors. So the Oceanside harbor, built in 1963, was really a culmination of a dream that Oceanside had really actually tried to accomplish since the 1940s. So for almost 20 years, and it took that long until they were able to get this, the harbor. Of course, Oceanside's sixth pier that we have today was built in 1987. Oceanside had seen quite an economic downturn, and this pier that was built in 1987 was really going to be, and really was, the beginning of a renaissance, if you will. Oceanside had a bad reputation as a gritty military town, even though the military had not defined us from our inception. When we built this new pier, we started doing other redevelopment plans had finally come into fruition that had been planned since the 1970s. And so we went from a pier that had been quite dilapidated and then started celebrating this one. And it really started to change the trajectory of downtown. Of course, Charles Moore designed our civic center that was built in 1990. And I do remember people saying, why is the city spending so much money on building a new city hall and library downtown? It should be out in the valley, because who comes downtown anymore? But again, it's just another, if you build it, they will come. And it was just, again, another stepping stone into this redevelopment. And I'd like to say, renaissance of downtown Oceanside. This is ironically the corner where Andrew Jackson Myers had his house built, the founder of Oceanside. His home was really built right on, nearly on the footprint of the fountain that we have in downtown Oceanside. And I could go on, and I wanted to add more photos to entertain you, and just I could go on talking about Oceanside forever. We are going to be moving to a new location soon, where we are still going to be in the Cultural Arts District of downtown. So I didn't put our address, but if you visit our website, you'll be able to find out where we are. And when we're still downtown in the police station. When we move to our new building, hopefully in the next month or two, we'll have a big announcement and update that. But I also have a blog called historiesandmysteries.blog, where I write a lot of stories about the Bunker House, St. Malo, the piers. I write a lot about, the buildings, Robert's cottages and things like that. So we have a great website, but we also have, the Histories and Mysteries, which dives a little bit deeper into a lot of those buildings, events, and people. So I don't know if you guys have any questions for me, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
So if you do have any questions, please type them out, and here we go. Oh, it's a comment. Thank you for a great talk.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really see good things for Oceanside. And again, as a historian, when I see all of the changes that are happening to Oceanside, people will say, this is my perspective since I've been here for 40 plus years. People say, well, it's not my Oceanside anymore. And I just want to say, it is your Oceanside. It's not Andrew Jackson Myers' Oceanside anymore. He'd be astounded. And I don't think he would be disappointed to see all of the changes and all of the growth, because Andrew Jackson Myers started promoting Oceanside even in 1883 as a resort city. And how can we be a resort city without a resort hotel? So when I look back and maybe, I'm not so happy because I've got these 2 new resorts and now I don't have my free parking like I used to have, 20 years from now, it's going to be a page in history, and people aren't going to lament it, I don't think, as maybe some of the locals do now. But, people resist change. I'm not a big person of change personally in my own life, but I recognize, knowing Oceanside and its history, that we have had just phenomenal changes almost every 20 years, whether it's a change that happens nationwide or statewide, or something catastrophic, if you will, that's life-changing, like a Camp Pendleton coming into being. Every 20 years, Oceanside has really seen phenomenal changes, for better or for worse.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any more questions. I think you've done a wonderful, thorough job.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, Dean, I really love talking about Oceanside. And I could have talked more about it, because it's a subject that I don't get tired of. But I do see many good things coming for Oceanside. I really do hope that some of these buildings that we have will be restored along with being renovated, be restored. And we do have a lot of character. Many of the buildings on our Coast Highway, especially in the downtown area, are all over 100 years old. The facades have simply changed. So we do have still a great history. We do downtown history walks the second Saturday of each month, starting April through September. It's a 2-hour walk. It's free. You don't have to register. Just show up at the Oceanside Public Library at 9 o'clock and we'll take you on a downtown history walk. And we'll point out all of those historic buildings, historic sites that, are the 120 or 130 years old, or sometimes now even just 100 years old. But we've got remarkable buildings and a remarkable culture that's still intact despite all of the many changes.
Wonderful. That sounds great. I think I'd like to take one of those.
Well, thank you again for having me. Thank you.
You are welcome. Let me, no more questions. Okay. Thank you for being here today, Kristi. And as we continue our exploration of local history, we invite all of you to join us next month for Penning the Past for Forgotten San Diego with David Marshall and Eileen Magno. That's April 12th at 11 a.m. Through a captivating mix of vintage postcards and expert narration, they will reveal lost architectural treasures and hidden stories from San Diego's past. Don't miss this unique opportunity to see rarely viewed images and uncover the fascinating history that time has nearly erased. And thanks to everybody who joined us today for Penning the Past. If you've missed any of last year's webinars, you can watch or revisit them on the SOHO San Diego YouTube channel. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. And everybody have a great weekend. Thanks again, Kristi. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.